into the afternoon of activity, so I'd like to explain how it's going to work. I'm going to present for about an hour, and I have a goal, which is to be as non-politically correct as possible. And I hope you will just come along with me on that. And I am presenting things from a global perspective, and I think that's actually quite helpful when you realize that what you're suffering from or experiencing is common around the world. Now that can be both depressing and reassuring at the same time, and I think you'll have both of those emotions. I'm going to speak for an hour, and then you're going into a conversation that is meant to illuminate in your own experience many of the concepts that I will be describing here about what is good leadership, period. What is good leadership? I don't care if it's turbulent or calm or whatever. What is good leadership? And I'm going to, through these questions, have you explore your own experience with a good leader. And I'm confident that you will all be in deep congruence about the characteristics of good leaders. And then we'll have time in the workshops, if you're participating in them, to really explore in more detail what this means for your own leadership and how you implement things. So look at this photo. Can you dim some light so the screen shows up better up there without inhibiting the camera? Can you see what that is? Okay, it's Hurricane Katrina coming in from the Gulf Coast. For me, it's an incredibly powerful image. So you're going to tell me if you can see it well enough. It's clear? Okay, because from here at the angle, it's not. So I'm going to talk about three things. And one is the global dynamics over which we have no control, but that are seriously impacting our leadership. And then the second question is one about personal vocation. Paul, I'm just so thrilled with everything you said. But to think about public service as a vocation and to be returning again and again to that clarity of why am I putting up with so much nonsense? And why am I putting up with these insults and this insanity on the part of decision makers? We have to return to a sense of vocation and calling. And then the third bit, which we will talk about more in the workshops, but I do want to go through what do you have to be prepared for if you really want to be implementing this form of leadership, which I am describing as the difference between heroic leadership and hosting leadership, and I will explain those terms in a little while. But the first thing I'd like to talk about is my sense of what's going on in our globalized culture. It's operating as a centrifuge extractor. Now, you may not remember your science, but centrifugal force is the kind that spins things away from each other. And the sole purpose of a centrifuge extractor is to take ingredients or solutions that were combined and separate them by using speed. So for me, this is a very apt metaphor of what's going on in this global culture. It's not specific to any area. It's happening everywhere because we are moving so fast and in such a complex setting that we're actually spinning away from each other, have less time for relationships, less time for thinking. And this is a kind of devolution of human capacity that I find very alarming. I especially find it alarming because this is a truth that I see throughout history. We can get through anything as long as we're together. But we can't get through turbulence, we can't get through chaotic times, we can't get through uncertainty just by isolating ourselves and ticking off the boxes on our task list. So for me, this is the biggest framing I can put of our great dilemma at this time is, how do we restore relationships to our organizations? How do we lead from a position of establishing good, clear, trusting relationships as Paul described? Because that's the only way we're going to get through this time. So let me talk a little bit about these global dynamics. And as I said, what part of this is meant to show you how depressing it really is. Part of it is meant to show you that there is an ever more urgent need for the kind of leadership that Paul just described. That it's up to us to determine whether we're up for this, whether we're willing to step forward. And these global dynamics are beyond our control. So they're just things we have to account for and notice without thinking that we're going to change most of them, although we can change some of them. So the first is the endless resource squeeze. You're not the only place in the world that is being told, well, you just have to do more with less, right? Well, it doesn't work that way, as you'll see in a moment. One of the things that we're squeezed is not just money, but it's relationships and time. Those things are disappearing. So we're working in a culture now. I mean, I was just overhearing someone on the patio describe how they're expected to work for 24 hours straight or such. So 3 years ago now, an article in Harvard Business Review called The Acceleration Trap, and it said this, that employees now are expected to work 2 to 4 times harder than before. And they gave new language to this because it was such an obvious trend. So you can get your choice of words that best describe your own experience. Do you feel overloaded? Do you feel multi-loaded? Do you feel perpetually loaded? What's behind this is a belief that you and I are just like machines. There's no other explanation for it. And we're told that we can work harder, we can work faster, and we can work smarter, and that there are no limits to that pushing of us. But I'm sure you've all discovered there are limits, right? One of the things that's adding to the complexity of work these days is constant use of policies, rules, and regulations to get us to do work that it is assumed we would not do on our own. So one of the great shifts that has gone on right now, and I'm glad that Paul mentioned trust, because when you look at the environment of governments everywhere who are just insisting on putting more rules and regulations in place, at the heart of that is distrust, is a belief that you and I will not do the work and will not do it well unless there are specific guidelines, standards, measurement, et cetera, et cetera. So my cousins live in London, and there's a nice little NHS health clinic across the street from their home. And one day, a few months ago, I was walking down the street there, and there was a little handwritten sign in the window that said, this clinic will now be closed on Thursday afternoons so we can catch up with our paperwork, right? And then underneath it, they had written, this will in no way diminish our service to you. And I thought, really? You really expect me to believe this? But think about in your own work now, the number of reports that you are writing and the amount of time. When are you doing those? When are you fulfilling all the reporting responsibilities that keep getting piled on people? And again, this is not just here. This is happening everywhere. It's a whole system that is driven by a profound distrust of people at this point. We have to be guarded, we have to be watched, we have to be supervised. We have to file these reports. And I hear from many, many leaders that they're so busy writing reports about their work that they don't have time to do the work for which they're writing the report, right? So there is some head nodding. This is an increasing problem everywhere that I go. So it's led to what I would characterize as these morbidly obese bureaucracies that simply can't function anymore. It's a beast that we're feeding with our reports. You may be in the position where you're requiring reports from other people. And just observe what it is doing to your sense of capacity, of your sense of making a difference, of your sense of actually doing meaningful work. I told you this was going to be depressing, right? So you just have to bear with me because this is reality. So another thing that's really impacting leaders is this culture of blame.